Welcome to episode 9 of the Shiny Things Improv podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Balaction, and this is the place where I get to pick the brains of all my favourite improvisers. Today's guest is Patti Stiles, a legendary improviser who trained with Keith Johnston in the 1980s and has since gone on to perform, teach and direct countless improvisational theatre companies all over the world. She's had a hand in shaping Rapid Fire Theatre, International Theatre Sports Institute, Impro Melbourne and Ostentatious. She's also author of the book Improvise Freely and holds the unofficial record of being the first female to improvise all 53 hours of the Die Nasty Soapathon. I caught up with her at the GBG Improv Festival in Gothenburg, where I'd just seen her and Joe Bill perform an incredible improvised play the day before. Here's a taste of what's coming up.
As improvisers, we need to fuel ourselves so that we have more possibilities when we're faced with an offer. When I was taught improvisation, it wasn't about get the laugh. It was about inspire your partner and follow what's evolving. And if what is evolving is something very dramatic, cool. A lot of teachers have started teaching blocking is when you say no, which isn't correct. Blocking is when you kill an idea. Another interesting observation for improvisers is to pay attention to who you're watching in scenes. Because quite often, you're watching the person who's not talking. Because the person that's talking, you're waiting to see the reaction or response in the person that's listening. We're wired for that. If we remove those rough and raw edges, it becomes packaged. And when it becomes packaged, why not script it?
Patti Stiles, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You have been improvising for 40 years.
Yeah, isn't that a bizarre number to say? That is just so strange.
It's a long time. What do you think has kept you doing improv for so long?
I still don't know how to do it. It still surprises me. It brings me great joy. There's so much possibility in what we can create. Yeah, it's still just a wonder, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Where did it all start for you?
In Calgary, Alberta, Canada, I did a work experience program at high school that placed me at the Loose Moose Theatre Company, which was the company that Keith Johnston was the artistic director of. And it's the founding company of theatre sports. So, yeah, I just ended up being a work experience student there and very, very quickly just went, wow, this is special. To have a group of people that create in a playful way without a lot of egos and anxiety, that the way they communicate, the way they work together, the energy on the stage, the risk-taking, the energy in the audience, just everything about it, the stories, the types of stories, it just lit me up in so many ways.
And in all those years, have you had periods where you've fallen out of love with it?
Yeah, I think with any relationship, you go through periods where it starts to feel monotonous. You start questioning your decisions. You wonder what's the value? Is there something else on the other side of the fence? That's, more enticing. But what I've come to realize is often when I'm in those stages, so if I'm feeling things are monotonous, it could be that I'm not stepping into the work. I'm expecting everybody else to make it sparkly and dynamic for me, but I'm not showing up to play. I'm not walking in going, hey, how can I support you tonight? What have I never seen you do? What would be the fun of tonight? What's the possibility? And when I stop realizing that every time we walk on stage, our only limitation is ourself. So if I walk off stage and I'm bored with what I've done, I'm accountable for that, you know? But sometimes also you can get into repetitive patterns of what you're doing. And when that happens, I go, I need fuel. So I'll listen to music I've never heard before. I'll go for a walk in a different part of the city. I'll go to an art exhibit. I know nothing about the artist. I'll pick up a book I know nothing about. I'll open the dictionary and start looking at words I don't know. Something to break creative monotony, because as improvisers we need to fuel ourselves so that we have more possibilities when we're faced with an offer. If someone says, "What would you like for dinner?" and you only ever have fish and chips, your answer is probably going to be fish and chips. But after the 17,000th time you've said that, you're bored with yourself. But if you look at all the menus online and all the possibilities of all these amazing cuisines from around the world, then someone says, "What do you want to have for dinner?" And you say, "Moussaka." "What do you want to have for dinner?" I want to have sushi. "What do you want to have for dinner?" "I want to have, cacio e pepe." And then you're exciting yourself and your partner, who's probably going, what is that? I don't know what that is. So it's also our responsibility to feed ourselves as artists.
Your show on Saturday was really amazing. For those obviously listening that didn't see it, it was kind of like a really emotionally deep play about a couple and their kind of different stages of their relationship. It was so patient, and what really struck me was that you weren't going for laughs. It felt like you were improvising to enhance the characters, to enhance the depth of the emotion and drive the story. And obviously that resulted in some really funny moments throughout the show. How have you learned or trained yourself to feel comfortable when the audience is quiet?
I had a very different impro upbringing than a lot of improvisers. So, although we played theater sports, and theater sports is, mostly comedic, a lot of games, a lot of scenes, we were a theater company. So, it's the Loose Moose Theater Company, not the Loose Moose Impro Group. And Keith Johnstone's a playwright. So his focus with improvisation, the technique of acceptance and all of those wonderful skills as we have as improvisers. But he also had an eye on story. How do we create story? Be it a 1-minute scene, a 2-minute scene, a story in a game, a longer story. How do we use our beautiful natural storytelling skills? And how do we develop those? And when I was taught improvisation, it wasn't about get the laugh. It was about inspire your partner and follow what's evolving. And if what is evolving is something very dramatic, cool. If what's evolving is hilarious antics, cool. We were creating an experience for the audience, but in a night we would try to have different tones and textures. So even in a theater sports show, we would try to do something political. We try to do something heartfelt. We try to do something silent. We try to do something with different energies so that the audience had, a buffet of flavors. It wasn't just one thing, scene after scene after scene after scene. Because of that, it wasn't until I started playing with other companies that it was defined comedic or dramatic or, oh, you do silent or you do emotional. It was just like, I'm improvising. It's just, that's what's arriving in this scene. Sometimes Joe and I will make a decision about our show. We'll say, what haven't we seen in this festival? because festivals are a great opportunity to create a range of opportunities for students to see variety. And if we've seen a festival where there's been a lot of fast and funny and sharp and that sort of play, we go, it might be nice for people to see something other. So let's sit in that. If we've been at a festival where everything is dramatic and genre-based, then we're like, okay, time to get the comedy pants out, and we'll do that. But to come back to your question, because my training never focused on be funny, it was focused on how is the improvisation evolving. Right from the very beginning, I was comfortable with silence because that's what I was trained to accept. And I love when the audience is just holding their breath, or when you have the audience in a moment and you turn and you look and you can feel everybody's eyes turning with you. Or if you start to cry in a scene and you can hear the audience doing a little bit of that, that to me is just as much a rush as the roar of laughter from everybody. Because our job on stage is to give the audience an experience.
Yeah. How do you think about story? Because that's another thing that struck me. There's obviously these days a lot of narrative improv shows, comedy improv shows, and they tend to sort of approach story in a more cartoonish way because that's often the most successful way. You create a very simple story so that everyone on the team can follow and make quite big choices and find yourself traveling very far. In your show, it was actually a very sort of subtle story that felt a lot more like something that you might have been written and you might see in a theatre. How do you approach story when you're improvising?
That's a great question. There were techniques that Keith worked with us on in story development. So we didn't follow who, what, where. We didn't do hero's journey. We didn't do all of those structures. What Keith had us focus on was platform. So what is being created in the foundation of the scene? What's arriving? And when you're creating a platform, you add offers or incidental details. So if I start a scene in a kitchen and I'm making a pot of coffee, what cupboard I've gone to, where the coffee is, where the coffee machine is, do I use milk or not? Do I open a curtain? Is there a cat or a dog in the room? Is there a table, chairs? Am I humming? Am I happy? Do I put bird seed out? All of these things are creating the environment, but they're also incidental details because right now they're offers, but we don't know if any of these offers are going to be important. It could just simply be the environment. However, any of these offers could be really important later on when we're justifying the story or the story's developed and we're finding reason. So we'd create rich platforms. Then we would work on whose scene is it. And you don't know. Until you're in it, you don't know. So the scene could be your scene could be my scene, the scene could be our relationship. And it can change between. So if you're doing the play Hamlet, it's clear. Every character in Hamlet is there to affect Hamlet. If you're doing Romeo and Juliet, that's different because that story is about the relationship. So all the characters there are there to affect both those characters, but also in affecting them, it affects the relationship, right? So we would do work on, when you're in a scene, how can you sense whose story is it? Usually the character with the highest stakes or the character that could lose the most. So in the show that you saw with Joe and I, it started as my story. It started to shift to his story when we realized that he was still a virgin. Then it went into our relationship when it broke. And then it started to drift back a little bit to my story with regret. But you're kind of sensing and feeling it because as improvisers, it is moment to moment to moment. We would work on advancing. So quite often, improvisers build either a short scene or a long scene or a long form to a point where we're at the edge of a cliff and it's now time to jump into the unknown. That's usually the point that stories stop because everybody backs away from the edge. We're afraid of the unknown. We don't want to take the big risk because we could screw it up. So people will go sideways or back up and they won't jump. We got trained in jump. How do you tilt a character? How are you changed or affected? How do we deliver on the promises that we've made in the story earlier on? And those promises could be in the platform through the incidental details. So when I was feeding the bird, if I told the bird a secret, that might be something that's now important in the advance, right? Once you advance, things kind of take care of themselves because you've done the work. What I've noticed a lot when people maybe don't have a lot of experience with storytelling or narrative work is they rush through platform, so they have no foundation. They start spinning their wheels in discussion and negotiation to try to figure out what it is. They avoid jumping into the unknown. Then there's a sense of panic as they try to rush to the end and find an ending, but it doesn't really feel like it's connected to anything before. And it's because I think they just don't have these tools in place of understanding what you're creating as you're creating it. And these tools work comedic or dramatic, short form, long form, situational comedy, or, monoscene. The principles are still there. You just use them differently. If I'm doing a 3-minute scene, the platform's going to be shorter. If I'm doing an hour long form, maybe 2 or 3 scenes are platform. So depending on what you're creating, you can use these tools for that. So that for me is kind of in my impro bones. That's where my impulses lie, navigating those tools.
You mentioned the foundation and the details that you may pick up later in the story. Something that I struggle a little bit with in improv is, on the one hand, you're present and you're just in that moment and you're just responding. But on the other hand, you need to also sort of be above that and be remembering everything that's happened and be thinking. Is that something that you're still consciously aware of, or how do you deal with that?
Of course, the brain is active. Excuse me. So, from a scientific point of view, you're thinking. But when I'm creating the platform, I'm not consciously thinking. I'm in a state of response, impulse, and intuition. Because I'm really present, I don't struggle to remember. And I think, and that's not because, I'm amazing. Not at all. It's a trained skill. And part of that training is I'm genuinely curious about what my partner's going to do. I'm really interested. And I've been trained to inspire my partner. I haven't been trained that I have to have moves. I have to have ideas. I have to come in and do things. I've been trained in, what do you need? What would be good for you? How do I unlock you? So part of that difference has trained me to pay attention in a different way, because my impulse and responses and reactions are very much in relation to what I'm seeing in you. And because I'm that attentive and I'm that curious, it helps me to remember. If you're on a first date with someone who you're really into, you remember. You remember, did they laugh when I made that stupid joke? What drink did they like? How did they feel when I asked them this? And they like this piece of music, so I'm going to get that. Because you want to remember, because it's an important moment for you. If we're in a state of survival, we're worried about the future, we're a bit stressed about outcome, we're not really present. In life, if you're a bit stressed about outcome, that's when you forget where you put your keys. That's when you start banging into furniture because you're not present, you're distracted, the critic is on your shoulder, you're analyzing and you're building worry and fear. But if you're really going, wow, look at the way you're looking at me, look at the angle of your head, that means something. It's a different thing. And I find that when it comes the 3/4 pointer at the end where it's useful to reincorporate or bring things back, not always, I mean, I'm human, but often it's not a struggle to remember the things in the platform because it's such a joy to see what's happening. I'd said to Joe after our play the other night that where the audience placed the chair that I ended up sitting in, which was right up against a flat, which was a strange protective hidden. And I remember saying the line, I like boundaries. And later when I threw out the offer of maybe our relationship was starting to get argumentative and I was like, you can't come in. He didn't pick up on the argument. He went into future while I was still in the past. But I had an impression that if he came in, this is the reason I went, you can't come in, came from that line in the platform about my boundaries. That I didn't think that. I became aware of that after it came out of my mouth, that the reason I was reacting that way was because I said earlier on, I've got boundaries and don't cross them. I've got hard lines. And I love when that happens because that's not me consciously putting the puzzle pieces together. It's something that's arriving. And I'm surprised by the story that's happening as the story is happening. But as an actor, when you're doing text work, you want to learn it, digest it, then forget it so you can live the moment as it's happening. But in improvisation, we get that gift. If we're brave enough to really be in the present and not worry about the future, these things happen. And that's probably why I'm still doing it and probably why I don't feel I know how to do it yet, because there's still so much in those moments yet to arrive.
Do you still have bad shows?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. But bad, there's a scale of bad. The scale of bad. I think as an individual, we all know when we're kind of floating in the work or surfing the creative vibes, when we're in a show where we're working, and when we're in a show that we're not really there. So for me, there's a scale of bad in that. When I go, wow, I don't think I was helpful to anybody. I don't think I was useful. Really wasn't contributing. Wasn't needed in that show, So there's my self scale of bad. There's the scale of bad of, are all the improvisers in the show actually working in a place of support, connection, fearless, joyful play, and discovery? Or do we have energies that are stepping all over each other, elbowing each other out of the way, being aggressive, not supportive, attacking people's ideas? That's a whole other level of bad. And I know even as I say that, some improvisers like that. Some improvisers like to play in the scrum. I love the heat of a moment. I love to be surprised. I love the risk. I don't like anybody making anybody else lesser. I don't like that. And I don't think it's necessary, because often when the person is throwing someone under the comedy bus, they're doing it to reward their own ego. And in a world of collaboration, where all of this balances on a tightrope, and part of that tightrope is trust, you don't get to do that, in my book. So shows with bad behavior, and that bad behavior is also, if people are being racist, homophobic, that's a whole other level of bad for me. Then there's a lot of scales of bad. Bad that we don't meet our creative objective. So maybe the show was fine for the audience. It was entertaining. They had a good time. They feel they got their money's worth. But did we meet the goals that we had set for ourselves? I know a lot of people will go, well, you can't call that bad. I don't. Another thing we worked a lot with Keith Johnstone was to not worry about failure, to learn how to accept failure, to realize that mistakes are learning opportunities. So I don't mind saying a scene was bad. I don't mind saying I made a mistake. I don't mind going, that show didn't work. that doesn't define me as a performer. That doesn't define my skills. It just is an honest assessment of that moment, that scene, that show. But in that honesty, then I can go, why? Instead of going, oh, everything's good. When people go home and just, torture themselves with all the reasons it wasn't, why can't we just be honest with each other? We kind of all know when it doesn't work. And I feel much better being in a room of improvisers when something doesn't work and everybody goes, yeah, well, see you next week. Instead of a room of people going, yeah, that was funny, where everybody knows it wasn't. I also know that you need people with experience and trust and so forth. So there's scales of bad. And then there's moments that don't work and moments that do work. And there's never a show where every single moment works. There was lots of moments in the show the other night with Joe that I was like, missed that. Don't really know what's going, like, did you get that? You didn't get that. Oh, did we do that? Was that because that's just human nature. And also for me, those are the places that I get to still learn. It's like, oh, we asked the audience, there was a whiteboard. We never used the whiteboard. It was assumed that it was there as part of the room, but we never wrote on it. There could have been something on it. There could have been a message from the past that never quite got rubbed off. So afterwards I went, I feel bad that we left that offer off. Okay. That's what it was. But I don't think the show was bad. I just recognize I missed that. But yeah, there's some shows that I'm like, I want to give the audience their money back.
And how do you deal with that? Does that stick with you for long?
It doesn't stick with me for long in a, ouch. It sticks with me in a learning, pondering reflection where I go, okay, why didn't that work? What could I have done to be more supportive? The moments that stick with me a long time is when I feel that maybe I let someone down, that I didn't catch the moment they were in strife to help, that maybe I saw a moment and I doubted myself and then I went, oh, that really could have been helpful. Those are the moments that sit with me longer because I so value when someone inspires me or catches me or lights me up, that when Joe has an expression, we're in service to each other. And when I feel that I wasn't quite there with my partner, those are the moments that I'm like, okay, why? Was I too tired before I did the show? Maybe I should have done a stretch. Where is my brain? And if I was focused on my clever line and I let you fall while I was thinking of myself, I have a hard time letting myself off that hook. But that's me. People will have their own scales.
You ran a workshop here at the GBG Improv Fest called No Isn't Always a Block. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Keith Johnstone has developed a bunch of terminology that helps us understand when we move stories forward and when we don't move stories forward. And one of these terms is blocking. Now, it's a term that drifts around improv communities. Not all improv communities use it, but it drifts around. But it's not, very few people have a clear definition of what it actually is. And so a lot of teachers have started teaching blocking is when you say no, which isn't correct. Blocking is when you kill an idea. But you can kill an idea with yes. You can kill an idea by avoiding it. There's many ways to kill an idea. No can be one of them. But no can also be used to create resistance. It can be used to create a tilt or a twist. Actually, when Keith used to say, blocking is killing an idea, and some ideas should be killed. Because blocking, when we're teaching beginners, we teach them not to block. Because at beginner level, people are afraid of their creativity. So we want their ideas to be accepted so that they feel comfortable to contribute their ideas. when people are comfortable contributing their ideas and their offers and they start to build confidence, or when we start looking at how we're creating stories, then we have to recognize the tools that we have to do that. And blocking can protect a partner. Blocking can get a story back on track if someone's missed a point and they're going to sidetrack it off in a completely different direction. So blocking isn't bad. Blocking is a tool. If you're blocking someone because it's like, I just don't like your idea, come on, we're improvising. If you're blocking because it's like, oh, I can't go there, then that's useful. An example, I'm going to ask you the same question 3 times and answer yes, first time, no, and then maybe. Yeah. Will you marry me?
Yes.
Will you marry me?
No.
Will you marry me?
Maybe.
With those 3 answers, was there one that felt like, now it doesn't feel like we have the next step or next possibility or a weaker reaction?
Probably the maybe.
Yeah. Because the maybe puts us into discussion and negotiation. Nothing's happened. The yes, we're going to be in, love land and probably talk about the marriage. But now we're planning instead of doing. The no is going to change me, which is going to heighten the relationship. And it makes it immediate and now that the audience goes, whoa, oh, you weren't expecting that. So depending on the type of story we're telling, if we're in a long form and it's Romeo and Juliet and we've got to get on with something, the yes and moving on to the marriage is probably useful. If we're doing a short 3-minute scene and we want to squeeze some juice out of this moment, the no is going to tilt me, make me change, and something has now happened in our relationship that's got us to react and respond to each other. The maybe would actually be more the block because it's killed the idea of will you marry me? You haven't answered it. It's no longer about that. It's about trying to get an answer. And it's also like we used to do exercises where we'd block each other. Have one person block, one person accept. Or 2 people block positively. Let's see how far you can get if we're both blocking. Because Keith used to ask us to always challenge and question the ideas. Don't just follow them. Explore them. See what that could be. Yeah, and sometimes it's fun. Joe blocked me a couple of times in the show. And he did it specifically because he knew I was teaching that workshop. He's like, I'm going to block you so the students can see this in action. And he was a little twinkle in his eye when he did it. And I was like, I know what you're doing. Yeah. But the story still progressed. Because, he said no so that people go, oh, is that a block? But it wasn't really a block because his no actually just created a resistance that moved the relationship in a different way. It didn't kill the idea. So the workshop's kind of about that. I mean, it's, as improvisers listening to this, watch shows, and you can kind of sense it when you're in a scene or when you're watching a scene, when something kind of hits a roadblock. We feel that. It's like, how did we get in this pothole? Then reflect, what was just said? It might be a no. It also might be yes. I'm going to kill you. Yes! Great! Now what? You pulled the rug out of my risk, my threat. You've minimized it. So now I've got to fight for me to be scary. And we can game that, but the story isn't moving forward. The idea has been killed, and we're going to sit now in talking about how we killed it and trying to make something funny out of that.
It makes me think about a theory that I've been ruminating around my head based on trying to notice when I stay engaged in a scene and when I don't, when I'm watching as an audience member. Because I find some scenes it's very hard to stay focused, and other scenes I cannot help myself but be engaged in. Yeah. And I've been trying to think, what is that? And I've been thinking it might be to do with the gossip part of our brain, because as humans, obviously, we're sort of wired for gossip, and when there's potential for gossip, our brains can't help but focus. But when, if someone's just talking about mundane things, it's very hard to focus because you're like, well, that's no use to my gossip brain. And saying no to a marriage proposal seems much more gossipy, and so you would engage more to that.
Yeah. In Keith terminology, we have a term gossip, and gossip is talking about things that are not directly affecting you. So the weather, sports, news, that sort of thing. And gossip can be useful in platform because it can help establish relationship or get a feeling of how these people are in their day-to-day life. But gossip without interaction is just empty promises. It's like empty calories for the audience. And at some point, the audience gets that. So on paper, if you wrote everything that person said, it might be really funny, the wordplay, but it's not lifting from the stage because there's no reaction or interaction between the characters to give it any significance. And again, this isn't dramatic or comedic, it's both. You watch great comedians, they're in a state of constantly reacting to things. Yeah, reaction, response. Clowns, the same thing. So I wonder if the difference is when people are doing the gossip, it's how they're reacting to each other as they're saying it that's keeping you engaged. It's not the words, it's how they're responding as people that's making you go, ooh, instead of, okay, let's talk about toast. Yeah, toast.
I guess sort of what I'm thinking more is like, it's that if people are having relationships and things are happening within their, so not so much that they're gossiping, but there's a part of our brain that's engaged because it doesn't know you're watching a play. It's as though you're overhearing some real people within your tribe or your community. Yeah. And when they're doing things which are relationship-y and could be gossiped about, you're engaged.
Yes. Yeah. When you're witnessing a story that might be worth telling someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would still say as an exercise, add to your observation, when they're telling that story that got you engaged, was there a change or a reaction that made you go, oh, this is interesting? Because if I say, will you marry me? No. We go, ooh, in this exercise, there's a possibility. But if that's the way we set it on stage, will you marry me? No. Okay. You're going to lose focus.
Yeah.
Will you marry me? No. You're going to lean in. And you're going to lean in not because of the way I said no, but because the possibility in how I said no, how it's going to affect the other person. Because I said no in a cold, callous way. Ouch! We're expecting a reaction. If it was a film, the camera would go point of view shot on the person that heard the no. Another interesting observation for improvisers is to pay attention to who you're watching in scenes. Because quite often, you're watching the person who's not talking. Because the person that's talking, you're waiting to see the reaction or response in the person that's listening. We're wired for that. Since you were a child, in your crib, with these massive potato heads coming over top of you, you're going, am I food? Is this a safe time or not? We're always looking for reactions. That guides us. That tells us a lot. But a lot of improvisers, when they get into over-intellectualizing everything and they're not in impulse, they're not in intuition, they're not in responsive play, all of these human reactions get turned off. So what you see is kind of almost cardboard cutouts of who they are as humans, moving around the stage, talking, but the words aren't lifting. The relationships aren't deepening. There's no story moving anywhere. And they're applying all of this great technique, and nothing's happening because there's no subtle reactions, responses that let your partner know what's going on with your character, let you know what's going on with your character, and let the audience in on that thing that would make you lean and listen in over someone's shoulder in a story, because we are fascinated about learning about people. So if there's an opportunity to learn, which usually someone being changed is a little crack in the eggshell for us to get insight in, we're fascinated. You know, if I said, this morning I got up and I went to the store and I bought some milk and I brought it home and I put it in my coffee. If I told that story at a dinner party, everybody'd go, right, we've got that type of storyteller at the table. Because everybody's still waiting for, and why? Why are you telling me this? I've given you a sequence of events. I've completed an action, but it doesn't feel like anything's happened. I got up this morning. I went to buy some milk. I got the milk. I brought it home. I put it in my coffee, and as the milk moved in my coffee, it spelt my name. I burst into tears. Now at the dinner party, you might be thinking this person's a bit odd, but you want to know where it's going because you're not sure if I'm telling a joke, if I'm a mystic, what happened, was it a dream? But I've given you a moment where I was changed. I think it's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think improv, there's so much about the human condition and psychology that comes out through improv, and I think it's why it's so addictive to both watch and to do.
Yeah. Just like I said at the beginning, I'm still doing it because I don't know how to do it yet. I feel like I know, a spoonful, and I'm standing in the middle of an ocean.
In the years that you've been improvising, lots of different schools and approaches have kind of come and gone, and some have stuck. One of those is the UCB style of game, which a lot of schools around the world now teach, including the Free Association in London, which is where I'm based. How do you think of game, and do you think it's creating a new thing, or is it simply a way to talk about something that was already being done?
I'm not an expert on game because it is a different school philosophy. But when Joe and I talk and play, part of the reason we do our play is because when we met at a festival in Texas. And at the start of the festival, I had someone walk up to me and go, "Hey, you're that Johnstone chick, aren't you?" It's like, well, Keith doesn't own me. Like, I've not trained with him. And the person went, yeah, well, we'll see what you can do. It's like, seriously? Then I found out that people were going, Joe Bill's coming in. He trained with Dell. Patti trained with Keith. Like, this could be a thing. Like, how are they going to get along? Which is just stupid. And of course, Joe walked up to me and said, "Hey, I'm Joe." And I was like, "Oh, I am Patti. Do you want a beer?" "Yeah, sure." And we chatted, sat on the floor of the party and chatted for 4 hours with people walking by and checking in to see if we were fighting. So the first time we did our play, the promo was Joe Bill, trained with Del Close. Patti Stiles, trained with Keith Johnstone. Can they work together? Which is just dumb. And there are different techniques. So Joe sees scenes with the concept of game. And he's actually got a workshop, story brain, game brain, something else brain. Because he's realized it's just different terminology and different ways of looking at very similar things. So this question would be great for him. For me, I don't think Game of the Scene is new. I've heard about it for a long time. I don't see it creating new work. I see new groups doing it. And so for them, it's new. And they're doing shows that are new for them. But in the vantage point of, the years I have, it's not new in the global sense. And that doesn't take away from the newness for that group. That's where they're at. That's their exploration point. That's, they're hitting puberty. Great. Have at it. Let those hormones bounce all over the place. But I don't at a festival see new shows. And I know even when I say that, there's going to be people going, well, we do this. And I'm like, yeah. I see repackaged. I see reformatted. I see a lot of repetition. I see people stealing each other's ideas. I haven't seen anything where I've gone, wow, that's an evolution. Wow, that's a game changer. I think the closest has been when Rebecca Northen, who's also trained with Keith, she started doing a solo improv show as a French clown where she would date an audience member and the show was a whole relationship with this person. You know, sometimes they would get married, they'd have a kid, they'd, figure out, how to be intimate. And this person might be there with their wife. And Rebecca would be constantly checking with the wife for consent. And there was a timeout area that at any point they could go over and, so how are you feeling about this? Is this good? Okay, let's go back. And it was a way of using the audience and clowning and improvisation in a one-person show, putting the audience member at the center of it. That was risky. It had a lot of risk to it and a lot of skill. That to me was a bit of a game changer because of just sort of the joyful, a long form with an audience member and having a full relationship with them. I don't know. I still am confused by the term game of the scene, to be honest. Maybe because I hear it used a lot of different ways. So maybe like blocking, it's a term that, depending on who taught it to you, drifts around. How would you explain game of the scene?
So I think at the Free Association, I think even there's a lot of, you could ask different people and they'd come up with different explanations. I think really it comes down to a pattern, a comedic pattern in a scene, and then we sort of try to take that a bit further. What does that say about your character? What point of view does that mean about your character? So you can play that same comedic pattern in a surprising way, rather than just hitting the same thing if it's just a pattern. It doesn't come from somewhere deeper. But it's really, it's just finding that comedic element and hitting it multiple times in new and surprising ways.
Yeah. For me, I would see that, because I get into that with Joe. We get into these game of the scene patterns, but I don't use that terminology. I go, oh, this is fun. You're lit up by this. I'm just going to keep giving you things to react and respond to, and I'm going to react and respond to you, and we'll extend this little comedy Lotsie for a while, and then we'll break it because we need to move on. But it's now in our pocket that at any point we could come back to, these are how these two characters deal with every time they order a coffee, or anytime someone has to make a decision, because now it's a part of the fabric of who we are. It's an offer in the platform. It's an offer in the reality. So for me, it's more understanding the rhythm and pattern, but not with the other stuff attached. It's like, well, you look like you're having fun. Great. I think I said to him, do you want to go on a date? And he was like, yes. I was like, great. And he's going, tonight? I was like, yeah, tonight good? Yes. And I'm like, cool. You're having fun playing this. So I'm just going to keep asking you questions and moving the date forward as I watch you get more and more nervous. That to me is, you're inspired. Your character's being changed. You're reacting. I'm playing the calm while you play the comedy. But we get to the same place at the end. Because after a while, regardless of the terminology you have around the work, when you're in the organic flow with someone and you're creating something and you're feeling that rhythm and you know it's for the audience, you find what works. Regardless of what language from what school is put around it, because as humans, we're natural storytellers. As humans, we understand these kind of little Lotsie routine plays. We do it with our friends. We've all got running gags with different friends, with lovers, with family members. That wasn't taught to us. There's something about how we are as humans that we get these things. So the different schools are just looking at identifying it differently, talking about it differently, and maybe putting different focus based on the type of work you want to achieve. If you're looking at doing something that's more premise or situational comedy or sketch, you're probably going to want to hit those things harder. But your creative objective is calling that kind of character into play, rhythm and pattern into effect. If someone said to me, we're going to do a show, we're kind of doing a Seinfeld-y thing, I go, great. I know Seinfeld probably did a lot of game of the scene in how the characters react and respond. To me, I wouldn't call it game of the scene. I go, right. It's set up, reaction, response, setting patterns, LATSI, so I could play it without knowing that terminology. But if we're stepping into a play, then we're still aware of the patterns that can happen in these moments that can amplify and enrich moments. But not every scene of a play is going to be game of the scene, because we're also creating a longer platform, because it's a longer piece that's going to evolve differently. So it's great to have all these tools in our belt. Then as an artist, what are you creating and who are you creating it with? And what's the objective of the work that you're doing?
We had a conversation the other day about the history of improv in London and the UK. You educated me on how far back the history of improv actually goes.
I brought out the history books. No.
Yeah, you were talking about how far improv in the UK actually goes, and it goes a very long way back. Why do you think it hasn't established itself in the culture in the way that it has in America?
It depends on how you view establish itself in the culture. There are a lot more improv groups in some of the cities in the US, but that doesn't mean there's more audience going. So, yeah, that definition, because I think there's an illusion that the improv companies in the US, there's, thousands of companies and they've got lineups around the block and everything is absolutely amazing. But if you start talking to the individual companies, there's a lot of companies struggling and a lot of companies closing their doors. And especially post-pandemic, there's a lot of shifting pieces on the board. So I think there's a couple of different things at play. In London, there was a change of how the work was being done and who the work was being done for. So when Keith was exploring improvisation ideas at the Royal Court Theatre, this is at the time that the Lord Chamberlain had to approve all the plays that went on stage, right? We don't realize just the liberties and the freedom we have with improvisation now, but in certain parts of the world, I should say. So when Keith was exploring these improvisation ideas with the actors at the Royal Court Theatre, and then they wanted to try them out on stage, there's no way they would get permission from the Lord Chamberlain because there's no script to read. So they called it a public workshop demonstration. That they could weasel around. So there's an anarchy in our history as improvisers. We are not traditional theater. We're a little bit kind of, the punk cousins of theater. But in those early days, it was very much risk. They're exploring stuff. They don't know if it's going to work. And there was a vibrancy and an energy about that brought audiences in. And then they were touring it around Europe and the same thing. Then it started, there was a next generation of people doing it, same sort of risk. Then I think the risk started to change where people were going, we've got audience. Ego started to kick in. People started getting comfortable with the assumptions of audiences coming. And that started to change the dynamic of what was happening. The same problem is happening in the US. There's a lot of companies that have what seems like full houses, but if your audience is full only from other students, depending on how you define success as a theater or comedy club, for me, when you create a theater or a comedy club for the public, if the public isn't coming, there's a question there that you kind of have to answer. If the public's trying to come, but your students are buying the tickets first, that's different. But I don't think that's quite the situation. So I think there's an illusion on an American scene based on a very small component of groups in a specific region. Does that make sense? What's nice to see in London is there's more groups that are getting a footing. And these groups are not just 4 people above a pub. Groups are defining their spaces, getting their home like you're getting, which is just so awesome. But also improvisation is starting to, with Showstoppers winning the Olivier Award, with Ostentatious just selling out all the time, and Showstoppers, with the Comedy Store Players still going, which is amazing. There's a credibility and a legitimacy that's starting to come into the work that wasn't in the London mind before. And I think that's really exciting, because improvisers now are not kind of almost begging for a tiny space to try to do their art. There's now spaces where it can have a home and an identity. The worry is that people don't start selling out our anarchistic, is that a word?
Anarchistic.
Yeah. It's fun to say anarchistic, but it sounds like the start of a song. That we don't sell out the risk-taking, raw, unpredictable vibrancy of the work that we do because we're afraid of an occasional show that may not work. We need to learn how to deal with those shows so the audience is still comfortable, but that we're still able to take the risk so the shows that blow our minds have the possibility. Because if everything is in the middle, that's when I think London's going to have the same problem that it had before. That it's gone from this will wow your socks off to, oh yeah, I've seen it now 5 times. Yeah. So I want to see it continually wowing the socks off.
How does it do that?
Taking risk. Improvisation by its nature is risk. Every time we walk on stage, we don't know what we're doing. Keith has got a beautiful quote. The stage is a scary place. You can either improve the armor or remove the fear. A lot of groups, once they start getting an identity, they lock improvisation down within an inch of its life. And that's all armor. We need to now make it predictable and reliable. We need to make it a for sure. At its heart, it's not for sure. What's for sure is how we learn to deal with it. That we can embrace failure and we can celebrate failure, and that failure doesn't hurt us. So then the audience can be in a state of these mad, brilliant comedians who are equally fine with something really screwing up in front of them. And the magic of watching something that didn't work and everybody on stage is going, yeah, nah, okay, next. Because then they saw the show that nobody else will see. If we remove those rough and raw edges, it becomes packaged. And when it becomes packaged, why not script it? Mediocre packaged improvisation with improvisers doing it for their own ego, assuming the audience is going to love them. It's not great to watch. I've seen a lot of people love doing it, but it's not great to watch. Raw energy, raw creative energy in a collaborative space with fearless players who might do something tonight that you've never seen before. The audience doesn't want to miss that. Everybody wants to be at the show that they get to talk about the next day. That. Can we get back to that? Many years ago, there was a British team that came over to Calgary to play in the Winter Olympics because we got arts funding to do a theater sports, an international theater sports tournament during the Olympics. Like we got medals and it was just, a chance to have a good time with each other. And Andre Vincent, who's a wonderful comedian, and I think it was a performer called Justin Case. I'm not sure. My apologies to all of them, and I can't remember the other person. But they came out on stage being introduced as the team. And the person with Andre had a piece of cardboard, like ripped off of a box with the team name written on it, and had a staple gun. And they got to the center of the stage, and he whacked the cardboard onto Andre's head and then staple gunned to which Andre just hit the deck, just fell. The audience was like, oh, shit, what just happened? Right? And Andre's like climbing off the stage with this piece of cardboard across his head. Well, of course it was just a piece of tape on the back of it. But the audience, we were at the show where someone staple gunned something to someone's head, or they got us. There's a lawlessness in that with great craft and skill and technique. Yeah, that. Because that's where it came from. All you have to do is watch any videos from the early, IO days or the early annoyance days or like the early loose moose days or any starting place of a company. And there's a risk and a freedom and a lawlessness and an exploration and an explosion because people are stepping into this unknown. And then it starts to become corporate in a weird way. And I know all the reasons why. I've been artistic director of a couple of companies. I get it. It's a struggle. But I've noticed that once you start compromising the form, can it be better than scripted? Can it be better than Netflix? Because what are we promising that nobody else can?
What do you do when you're not improvising or performing? What do you like to do?
I like to play with my dog, which is true. I love hanging out with my husband, spending time with him. I love gardening. Now living in Australia, the plants are just bizarre to me. And it's just a learning curve because it's just, they flower in fall and winter. And I'm used to Canada with snow. Like it's just, even though I've been there for a while, it's still, and they're bizarre plants. Like Grevilleas are just so unusual to a Canadian eye. So I like that. I like to play board games. I quite enjoy that. Hiking, going on adventures, and learning. My husband Chris, for my birthday this year, has given me, he's gone every month, your gift is going to be X amount of dollars for you to take and do anything to any kind of learning that you want to do. So, it's like a budget of fun that I don't have to go, oh, I'd really like to do this. What's going on with our bills this month? It's like, no, every month there's a pocket of money that you don't even have to tell me what you're doing with it. Pick a class, do what you want, just what do you want to do? And my head is spinning. It's like, oh, right. Oh, well, I want to learn a language and I'd really like to learn how to make this food. And, oh, gosh, could I do a tap dancing class? I haven't done that in years. And so learning is still really exciting for me. And now I get, a year of getting to go, what's that? So that's fun. What else? Reading. I feel like I'm writing a profile for a dating. I like to read and garden and long walks on the beach. Yeah. My friends are very important. And luckily through improv and theater, I've got a lot of really cool friends. They're definitely not boring.
Yeah, I tend to think improv is just a great filter for nice, interesting people.
It is. It is. With the sheer amount of people that are improvising. And I've been very fortunate to go to a lot of festivals. Very rarely is there someone that you go, just in general, like 98% of the time, people are just really nice, cool people doing this crazy ass thing of pretend and playing with each other. How did I get to do that for a living? How did that happen? Because it's pretty darn cool. Yeah. And, hopefully as, improvisers listening to this, as they're stepping on the stage and they're looking after their partners and they're looking after the audience, as teachers and directors, every time we go into the room to share this beautiful, pretty much oral tradition to empower the next generation to take the risks, to challenge the form, to question, to not be obedient to past ideas, to learn them, to understand them, but then explore with them. Understand, like if you're painting, what's the balance of these two colors together, and then screw around with it and see what you could do. That if we can keep inspiring and empowering the generations around us and coming up to take these wonderful, bold risks in the world of play, to not condition people to just keep repeating the past because of our glory days, I'm really excited to see the possibility of what could happen. I just hope that as a global improv community, we're brave enough to take the leaps to get there.
And on that note, Patti Stiles, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Shiny Things podcast. Don't forget to head over to shinythingscomedy.com for loads more improv-related posts, where you can sign up to our newsletter so you get all of our new content straight to your inbox. Until next time, I've been Aaron Belection. Happy improving.